Welcome to today's lecture. Today we will talk about Chapter 7, Wage and Salary Issues. About wage and salary issues that all managers and labor relation representatives have to deal with. All of us are concerned about wages. All of us are concerned about direct and indirect forms of compensation as well as other benefits that we all receive. In this chapter, you'll learn a lot more about union wage concerns, management wage concerns, negotiated wage adjustments, wage negotiation issues, wage surveys, costing wage proposals, and obviously, like almost all the other chapters, the public employee wage and salary issues, or at least the relevancy of the content for public sector employees. So you read about many different topics as they relate to wages that are direct or indirect. Wages are considered most important in very difficult bargaining issue in almost all negotiations between management and union representatives. Employees consider pay the primary indicator of employer goodwill because it is basically the meat and potatoes of collective bargaining. And without the wages, there aren't going to be any bargaining or negotiation. Wages and benefits are the largest single cost factor on employers' income statement for almost all organizations. It's important to look at wages because sometimes companies make mistakes and they don't follow the rules. They don't abide by the legal rules or the contract. In your textbook, for example, and also in newspaper clippings, you'll read how employees have brought lawsuits against their employers. For example, one case would be Starbucks. Starbucks paid $18 million settlement to store managers in California. UPS had $87 million settlement to 23,000 drivers. Walmart paid out $172 million that was awarded by the jury to California workers. Sony paid out $8.5 million settlement to video gaming employees. Citigroup and Solomon Smith Barney paid $98 million in settlement to 20,000 stockbrokers. IBM paid out $65 million in settlement to 32,000 technical and support workers. And also, it goes with the union organization as well. The company, for example, called Unite Here, which is a labor union organization, they have been charged with failing to pay organizers overtime. And also with Abbott Laboratories, one of the federal judges ruled that pharmaceutical representatives were due overtime pay. So if we don't follow the rules and we don't pay our workers properly, eventually there will be a lawsuit that basically costs you even more in terms of stress, in terms of hiring your own lawyers, arguing your side, and eventually you may end up losing anyhow because you didn't do it the right way the first time. So pay attention to these chapters, whether you're a manager or labor relations representative, and obviously follow the law, pay your employees fairly and equitably in all cases.
Wage and salary issues.
Wages are considered one of the most important, but also one of the most difficult bargaining issues for union and management representatives or teams. Employees consider pay the primary indicator of employer goodwill and the meat and potatoes of collective bargaining. Wages and benefits are the largest single cost factor on an employer's income statement. If we don't pay people fairly or equitably, there could be some cost associated with it. Just one example in terms of not paying workers overtime according to the laws of the local city or the state or the federal government can be very costly. So think about the examples that are mentioned in the literature. For example, with regards to Starbucks, $18 million settlement to store managers in California simply because the company supposedly did not pay them fairly for overtime work. For UPS, $87 million settlement to 23,000 drivers. Walmart paid out $172 million in California to workers and $78.5 million to Pennsylvania workers. Sony paid out $8.5 million in settlement to video game employees. Citigroup, Solomon, Smith Barney paid out $98 million settlement to 20,000 stockbrokers. IBM paid out $65 million to 32,000 technical and support workers. And also unions fall into this category of not paying people fairly as well. Unite Here, which is the labor union, has been charged with failing to pay organizers overtime. And finally, Abbott Laboratories is another example where a federal judge ruled that pharmaceutical reps were due overtime pay. So it is a serious issue to make sure employees are getting paid well, paid equitably and fairly according to the laws and according to the contracts that you as managers and labor relations representatives sign. Pay level is related to employees' expectations for maintaining standard of living in the cities and locations where they're living. And also because cost of living increases, therefore we have this expectation that our salaries will also keep up with the cost of living rises. So there are internal equity issues when it comes to pay. Equal pay for equal work. So if somebody is doing the same work in two different departments, supposedly they should be getting equal pay, assuming the qualifications are the same. Labor agreements typically provide for different job classifications with different pay scales depending on level of scale and type of work. Pay can be defined as pay for time work. You have hourly wages, and then sometimes you can have annual salary. Perhaps the hourly wage is the most common in contract discussions. In annual salary is usually discussed or expressed in pay grades. So you can pay people for units produced, we call that piecework, or somewhat a combination of the two, salary plus some sort of incentive process for additional work being done. Usually dissatisfaction of employees with regards to their pay tends to be brought to the bargaining table. Pay equity means equal pay for equal work is obviously always going to be an important issue. If pay grades are fairly structured and evenly applied, workers generally accept differential pay based upon job classification and internal wage levels. Timing of management pay raises in bonuses may become a source of dissatisfaction. There could be industrial differentials as well. The relationship between labor and production costs tend to affect the wages that people receive. Labor-intensive industries are able to provide fewer wage increases than capital-intensive industries. Union wage gains generally are highest where, first, employers' ability to pay is high because of discretionary pricing power and profitability. Second, when unions practice centralized bargaining. And third, when unions avoid fragmentation. Management must consider how wages affect their pricing policy and their ability to compete in a local or national or global market. They must maintain competitive labor costs, and they should pay comparable wages. In other words, it is necessary in labor-intensive industries that there's pattern bargaining and value-added bargaining, perhaps. Pattern bargaining relates to national unions negotiations where they focus on equal pay increases among employers in the same industry. And value-added theory simply states that wages should equal the contributions of labor to the final product. One of the important wage laws in the United States is Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. It provided some recommendations regarding minimum wage and overtime compensation. So managers usually abide the rules set by the Fair Labor Standards Act. The standard rate basically means you have pay range systems. So flat rate of pay for each job classification. There are some agreements which provide a pay range for each job, contains several steps within a range, permits recognition of different performance levels, and unions typically distrust merit increases because of the subjectivity of individual managers going into who should get a raise and by how much when it comes to merit increases. Piece rate system means straight piecework, which is the most common. In following piece rate has standard time and rate of production. Rising piece rate has standard time and rate of production as well. In standard hour plan is similar to piece rate plans. Deferred wage increases specify increases in base pay to take effect on future dates during a multi-year contract. Front-end loading means larger proportion of total percentage increase is in the first year of the agreement. In backloaded contracts provides lower wage adjustments in the first year but higher increases in later years. The cost of living adjustments, otherwise known as COLA, can be looked at based on the escalator clause to keep wage rates rising at the same pace with inflation. So the percentage of union workers that are covered by COLAs most likely to increase following periods of inflation. Elements of COLA are inflation index, schedule of adjustments, change in base pay, and also some of the maximums that are a part of contract in cost of living adjustments. Profit sharing or bonus plan is another popular one by most companies. This is where workers receive a lump sum payment in addition to regular wages. Management favors lump sum payments because payment does not automatically carry over to future years. Payment does not automatically increase cost of living. Payment only is made if a company makes a profit. Payment is not tied to inflation. Pay is related to productivity. And finally, workers feel more a part of the company when they are sharing the profits that are received by management and stockholders. The two-tier wage system pays newly hired workers less than current employees performing the same or similar jobs. Unions have accepted two-tier system in order to help preserve job security. Contract may or may not provide for the eventual merging of the two tiers, and the two-tier wage systems have an increased use in highly competitive industries. There are also some pros and cons associated with the two-tier wage system. So the pros are that it significantly reduces labor costs, there's maintenance of higher employment levels, and relief from wage compression between senior and junior employees on the same job. However, the cons or the negatives are the resentment, low quality, and low productivity from low-tier employees. There's high absenteeism and turnover of low-tier employees. And there's intensification of the preceding problems as low-tier employees increase in numbers. And sometimes the lower-tier employees feel as though they're being treated like a second-class citizen or less than the higher-tier group. The Scanlon Group incentive plans have the basis for labor management cooperation. Committees meet to consider cost-saving suggestions. And actual cost savings are divided among workers and the company. Lump sum payments increasingly are becoming more and more popular with management. The total cost during the contract is easier to predict, and they do not increase hourly wages. Let's talk about the productivity theory. So some employees should share in the increased profits caused by their greater productivity. Frederick W. Taylor talked about this over 100 years ago, that if we do use scientific management, then we need to obviously share the profits that come as a result of the scientific management with the employees who produce the additional work or profits. However, it is problematic to determine whether percentages of productivity and profitability increases are attributable to employees' labor or to machinery or to equipment or even to managerial ability. So as the learning curve increases, maybe we as employees, maybe we as managers, maybe the equipment and technology enhances the profitability. However, regardless of where it comes from, employees would like to have a piece of that profit. So it's good to share with them what is equitably fair to them. Negotiation wage issues also are partially dependent on the ability of the company to pay. Unions do contend that if the company is experiencing high profits, it can better pay its employees who have contributed to the good financial fortunes of the organization. Management perceives many limitations, though, including, number one, companies being reluctant to share financial data with the unions. And number two, the estimated total profits available during the term of the new contract is an important number to consider. Job evaluations come into the consideration of wage negotiation issues. So job evaluation is a process of systematically analyzing jobs to determine their relative worth within the organization. And job evaluations allow managers to create a pay system with a rate for each job that is commensurate with its status within the hierarchy of the jobs in the organization. Unions and management can use job evaluation to guide negotiation process in regards to wages. And job classification is common in labor agreements. Employer may not unilaterally change job classifications without obviously having a discussion with the union and labor representatives for the reason, the rationale, and hopefully for win-win thinking for both sides. And wage surveys do provide information on the external market conditions in terms of how much competition is paying their workers, and also in other industries for equal qualification, equal amount of work. People would leave if you don't pay them enough. So the wage surveys help assure that negotiated wage rates are justified by the market conditions. However, it is difficult to agree which actual source of wage information contains relevant jobs and data that are applicable to the particular organization, institution, or firm. Do we use the data from Department of Labor, industry wage surveys, or do we conduct employer-based surveys on its own? And finally, wage surveys provide ballpark information to negotiators. In regards to costing wage proposals, keep in mind that costing out a contract is important before you get an approval or you give an okay to the other side. Costing out a contract determines the financial impact of a contract provision change. The economic provisions can be reduced to dollar estimates. Non-economic items are more difficult to reduce to dollar estimates. Accurate costing procedures are generally accepted by both sides with little disagreements. So we have to be detail-oriented and provide all the information that's relevant to both union side as well as to the management side. Because labor costs are the single largest cost that is incurred, wage proposals require accurate costing. The methods used to cost union wage provisions include annual cost, cost per employee per percentage of payroll, and cents per hour. The elements in determining compensation cost include base compensation and roll-up. So base compensation is the employee's annual overall salary. Roll-up or add-ons or creep basically means the increases in the cost of benefits that is caused by negotiated wage increase. So benefit costs that increase could be Social Security and unemployment insurance, life insurance, overtime pay and shift premiums, and the pension benefits that employees receive. Elements in determining compensation costs could include total negotiated cost, Both sides must maintain their estimated cost of wage and benefit agreements, and both sides know the total cost when new items are added to the contract. Roll-ups are the direct increase in cost of benefits that results from a negotiated increase in wage rates, such as Social Security, overtime pay, and pension plans that we alluded to. And examples could include Social Security and employment insurance contributions, life insurance, overtime pay and shift premiums, and pension benefits. Profile 7.2 gives you an example of public sector concessions. A common pattern across the United States during the Great Depression was cities and states that were striving to avoid massive layoffs by sharing the gain of budget cuts through one or more of the following negotiated concessions that are mentioned in this profile. For example, you have the Chicago example where Mayor Daley offered unpaid furlough leaves to unions to avoid layoffs. 2 unions refused and suffered 431 layoffs. In Detroit, the mayor, Dave Bing, offered unions the choice of 26 unpaid furlough days to avoid layoffs of over 1,000 workers. That was 1/10 of the total workforce. In Los Angeles, California, the city and unions together developed a concession plan that included increased worker pensions and healthcare contributions. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, police rejected pay cut offer and accepted layoffs of 89 officers. But the firefighters voted 422 to 177 to accept 5.2% pay cuts in 8 unpaid furlough days and clothing allowances cuts in exchange for no layoffs of 147 members. In Illinois, newly hired employees must work up to 12 years more than current employees to receive full pensions. In San Francisco, 20 local unions accepted pay cuts of $100 million per year to avoid layoffs. In New Jersey, the state required employees increase their share of healthcare costs and banned part-time employees from drawing pensions. So these are some of the examples of public sector concessions where the unions and the management agreed that either there has to be layoffs or they simply reduce the payment or provide furloughs to meet their budgets. In summary, with regards to wage laws, keep in mind that the Fair Labor Standards Act affects negotiated wages by establishing minimum wage laws. Overtime compensation means that 98% of contracts provide for overtime above time and a half. Examples could be daily, 6 and 7 day of work. Pyramiding of overtime is usually prohibited. Mandatory overtime has become a target for unions because it keeps employees away from families and it encourages employers to have fewer workers. In 2005, the Department of Labor approved prepayment plans that pay employees overtime in advance so that weeks in which they worked less than 40 hours, their pay would equalize. The Davis-Bacon Act requires federal contractors with construction money to pay prevailing wage rates for the community where the construction has taken place. And the Walsh-Healy Act requires federal contractors to pay time in 1/2 for any time worked over an 8-hour day. So if you're working as a manager in the United States or as an employee, these laws become important for you to consider and to abide by. The standard piece rate means employees are paid standard rate per unit produced. In falling piece rate, employees are paid standard rate per unit. If employee produces more than the standard amount, their hourly earning increases. However, the rate per piece decreases. And in rising piece rate, employees are paid standard rate per unit. If employee produces more then the standard amount hourly earning increases and rate per piece increases as well. So union wage concerns include the ability to maintain the current standard of living, to provide for future economic growth, and to have a comfortable retirement for all their members and workers. Compensation is often seen as a measure of the organization's goodwill to its employees. Unionism changes the dispersion of wages, raising members' average wages over non-union members, but also standardizing wage rates within the union organization. Ultimately, unions expect a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. The management wage concerns include the fact that wages are usually the single highest cost factor on their income statement and balance sheets. They're concerned about the value added by labor to the final product. And also they're concerned that future revenues that are available are only estimated, but negotiated increases are definite. Unions point to the past profits to pay for wage increases, but past profit levels may not necessarily continue into the future when higher wage levels are paid. And also, we don't know too much about the future. Maybe some of the variables will change. So management is always obviously concerned about this. They do consider those factors. When it comes to profit sharing plans versus cost of living adjustments, keep in mind that COLAs are less desirable to union negotiators in years of low inflation rates. Union negotiators have been more concerned about job security nowadays, and they have been sometimes forced to accept lower wage increases and some givebacks due to non-union and foreign competition. Management, which has generally never liked COLAs, has been increasingly able to replace them with profit-sharing plans. Therefore, workers have a direct interest in the success of the company, and wages are at least partially tied to their productivity. Also, profit shares are only paid when a profit is made. So therefore, the company is able to pay, which is not always true with the cost of living adjustments or COLAs. As usual, your textbook offers you some tips from experts. So with regards to unions, what are the 3 wage issues union negotiation team members should look for at the negotiation table? Number 1, fairness at both ends of the wage and salary scale. Number 2, rewards for performance as well as for service. Number 3, equal pay for equal work. And on the management side, so what are some of the practical wage concessions that you can make without necessarily breaking the bank or without going broke or bankrupt? Number 1, swap indirect benefits and apply to direct labor. Number 2, lengthen the term of collective bargaining agreements. Number 3, stagger wage increases with minimum or no increase at the front end, but load up near the end of contract. And finally, give concessions in an area that will be used infrequently, but is a big morale booster, such as an extended family leave. So if we don't follow the rules and we don't pay our workers properly, eventually there will be a lawsuit that basically costs you even more in terms of stress, in terms of hiring your own lawyers, arguing your side, and eventually you may end up losing anyhow because you didn't do it the right way the first time. So pay attention to these chapters, whether you're a manager or labor relations representative, and obviously follow the law, pay your employees fairly and equitably in all cases.